Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back, and if you're new, thanks for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. I hope that you are all doing well. Today I am doing a book haul video. I hauled a lot of books in May. This might be my biggest haul ever. Hauls are now something that I think about in a different way ever since I have been doing the revisits. I sometimes think, don't haul too much because next year I will have to revisit this and see if I actually read any of these. So obviously this thought didn't seem to bother me this month, so there's a lot here. As usual, I'm going to start with books that I received from authors and publishers, and then we will go from there. So I'm going to start with a non-fiction book that I received from Ian Kennedy, who is a Canadian author and the author of On Account of Darkness, Shining Light on Race and Sport. So I've listened to a couple of interviews with Ian, and I've been very impressed. So I am really looking forward to reading this. Each chapter in the book is about someone in sports and how they overcame racism and still succeeded. So this is specific to Canadian sports, specifically the Chatham-Kent area in Ontario, which is an area that I know quite well. I suspect that I'm going to learn a lot about Canadian sports that I didn't know before, and that, these come, I think, at a very timely place in our history, when we are finally taking the time to acknowledge systemic racism. The next few books I received from publishers through ZG Stories. First is a collection of poetry called Friends Without Bodies. This is by Brendan McLeod, and this is published by Right Bloody North, and this publisher is new to me, and it's one that I think I'm going to be keeping an eye on, because they are the only Canadian publisher that focuses solely on publishing the work of spoken word artists. And I had a look at their back catalog, and there seems to be some pretty interesting collections, so I will probably be checking that out. This collection, Friends Without Bodies, I've actually already started it, and the poetry focuses on the pandemic and our reactions to COVID-19. And I admit that I have been kind of staying away from reading anything that had to do with the current pandemic. For me, it's just too soon to live it all again while we're actually still living it. So I can read about prior pandemics or possible pandemics that take place in the future, but our current one, I'm not quite ready for it. So this poetry collection is a little outside my comfort zone at this moment. But that being said, it has worked for me so far because I can just read 2 or 3 poems at a time and then set it aside. The poems vary in their style and structure, and I really like that. The descriptions so far have been really great. I will talk more about it when I do my June wrap-up, but I'm really looking forward to finishing this collection up. So also from ZG Stories and Portage and Main Press is Resurgence, Engaging with Indigenous Narratives and Cultural Expressions in and Beyond the Classroom. And this is edited by Christine McLeod and Katya Adamov, Ferguson. This is a guide that is great for teachers, educators, and librarians and families to engage with Indigenous perspectives and for greater equity in classrooms and communities and families. It's mostly for kindergarten to grade 12, and I'm interested in this because I work in education, and I'm hoping that it will be a good resource, even just for my own learning, and that it will give me some practical ways to help others learn as well. So the last book from ZG Stories is from Douglas and McIntyre, and this is the first book in a series called Death at the Savoy by Prudence, Emery, and Ron Bass. And it might seem obvious, but this murder mystery takes place at the famous Savoy Hotel in London. And it features like cameo appearances from some of the most prestigious guests of the Savoy in its time. Elizabeth Taylor, Bob Hope, Pavarotti. It takes place in 1968, and there is a dead body in River Suite 610. And the prime suspect is a Canadian, Priscilla Tempest, who is the head of the Savoy press office. And, you know, this is not my typical read, but for some reason, this just appealed to me. And I don't know, maybe it's because the main character is Canadian. I don't know what it is, but we will see. I'm not sure if it's like a cozy mystery. It might be. But I like the setting, and it's also supposed to have a lot of humor. So we will see how it goes. So next up are books from publishers that I support. First are books from Radiant Press. I can't wait to show you the covers of these first couple of books. First is Go by Shelley A. Leedahl, and this is a poetry collection, and I absolutely love the colors on the cover, and the lettering is raised. The poems in this collection are about major life transitions and how loneliness keeps us going. The next book is a memoir called Up from Garlic Flats, and this one, the pickles on the jar are raised as well as the words. It's just really cool. So this is by Vic Cicansky, and this is stories that he shares about growing up in Regina. Vic is a Canadian sculptor and artist, and he does ceramics and is known for his artwork, which features fruits and vegetables. So I will leave a link to Vic's website in the description box below so you can check that out. And in the book itself, there are actually pictures of his artwork. Let's see if I can find some here. There's some of those, and then some from his life as well. So then I have another poetry collection called A Thin Band by Canadian poet Katherin Edwards. The poems in this collection are about, you know, what we remember, what we forget, as well as grief and loss. Next is another poetry collection by Canadian poet Victor Enns, and it is called Love and Surgery. And it's actually the third in a trilogy called a Life series, I think it is. This one focuses on courtship and marriage, grief and loss of relationships, and then in this case, the loss of his leg. So I haven't read the others in the series, but if I like this one, then I may, go back and look into reading the other two as well. And then the last one from Radiant Press is a collection of short stories called Adam's Tree by Gloria Mehlmann. The book is divided into two parts, and it has 15 stories altogether. Now, I love a good short story collection if they are well written, and I especially enjoy it when they are interconnected. They don't have to be. But I don't have a lot of short story collections in my favorites list. So I am always looking to add to it, so we'll see. The stories in this collection are about life in the 40s and 50s on the Cowessis First Nation in Saskatchewan. And these stories are about war, PTSD, strong women, colonization, and the strength of the human spirit. So on paper, I should love this collection, so I'm hoping that that's the case. Another publisher that I support is And Other Stories, and the book that I have from them is The Visitors by Jessi Jezewska Stevens. Hope I'm saying that right. This story takes place in Manhattan, so that's a plus for me. As many of you already know, I love books that are set in New York because I love New York. The main character is the sole proprietor of an arts supply store, and we only know her as C, the letter C. She is divorced, alone. She has a new interest in her oldest girlfriend and has a persistent hallucination, and this is where it gets really interesting. The hallucination is in the form of a garden gnome, like this, with an interest in systems collapse. So this is probably not a book that I would have picked up on my own, but I'm willing to give it a try. Next, I also support the Republic of Consciousness. I think they do great work. And the book this month is The Deloread by Missouri Williams. Whoops. This is published by Dead Ink. And first of all, this is a really cool cover. And this is described as a dark read, unique, absurd, and gripping. It features a post-apocalyptic world after an environmental cataclysm. The rest of humankind has been wiped out, but a twisted, incestuous family remains along with all of their drama. And there's a revolution and a sitcom based around Thomas Aquinas. So there's a lot going on. There's all of that. I think that I will have to remember to pick this up when I'm like looking for a more strange and dark read. Next up are some classics. Some of you know that I collect the PaperMill Classics, and they have recently released several more. So I picked up 3 of them so far, the new ones. And you won't be surprised that one of them is my all-time favorite Canadian classic, Anne of Green Gables by Lucy Maud Montgomery. I love this book. It is the book that I have the most editions of, and I'm so glad that PaperMills has finally done this one and put this out. Next is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, which I have already read, but PaperMills has other Jane Austen books, so I'm happy to add this to the collection as well. And then the third one is one that I'm currently reading, and that is The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. And I am reading this as a buddy read with Michael from Michael Romeo Talks Books. And he has been very patient with me. Thank you, Michael, because I was really late in getting started, but now I have the time to read it, so I am getting caught up. I just recently watched the Clint Eastwood movie Cry Macho, and I also picked up the book by N. Richard Nash. This is about Mike, who was one of the best rodeo riders in the rodeo during his prime, and his boss sends him to Mexico to find his son and bring him back home so that he can use him as leverage in his divorce. This story is really about Mike and the boys' relationship, and usually I like to read the book first, before I watch the movie, but now I will just have to compare the book to the movie. This next book I've heard it talked about many times, Sharks in the Time of Saviors by Kauai Strong Washburn. And this story takes place in Hawaii in the 1990s. The main character is Nainoa Flores, who is 7 years old, and he falls off of a cruise ship in the Pacific Ocean. This story seems to be almost like a mythological story with some new supernatural elements, and it has themes of family, heritage, and survival. So this book is intriguing, even just from the title itself, so I'm hoping that it will be a good one. Next up is Little Family by Ishmael Bea, and I have Ishmael Bea's memoir to read as well. Bea writes about how he became a child soldier in his memoir, but this is a fictional story about 5 young people who have created their own family and live in an abandoned plane in an unnamed African country. And I love stories about survival, and I love stories about chosen family, and I've just heard that this is, beautifully written, so I'm looking forward to it. Next is another author that I have yet to read their work, but I really want to, and that is Fanny Flagg. I have Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe, and I haven't read it. I've seen the movie, but I picked up the sequel, which is this, The Wonder Boy of Whistle Stop. And I have a feeling that I will really enjoy both of them, but I haven't gotten to it yet. So in this one, Bud Threadgood goes back to Whistle Stop, where things have closed down and it's basically become a ghost town. And then in going back, he revisits his memories and learns more about his past and creates new friendships and memories. So my hope for this is that it will be a feel-good, kind of heartwarming story. 2 books that I have been highly anticipating are Red Comet, The Short Life and Blazing Art of Sylvia Plath by Heather Clark. This book was all over BookTube when it was part of the BookTube Prize in 2021, and I believe it came in 3rd in the nonfiction category. I have read a couple of Sylvia Plath books and historical fiction books, but like about Sylvia Plath. So I'm looking forward to kind of learning more about her in this massively huge book. The second one is Tin Man by Sarah Winman, which I have also heard great things about. This is a coming-of-age story of two 12-year-old boys, Ellis and Michael, who are friends, exploring their world and trying to survive the adults around them. And then one day that friendship becomes something more. And then several years later, Ellis is married and Michael seems to have kind of vanished. And this is the story of, what happened in the years between. So I've been very curious about this book for quite some time now, so I'm happy that I finally picked it up. The next books I picked up because they are authors that I want to read more of. And first is Jazz by Toni Morrison. I have never read any Toni Morrison, but I want to. And I picked this up in preparation for a project that I am doing next year with AJ from AJ Dunn Reads and Writes. So stay tuned for more information about that if you are a Morrison fan or if you want to be a Morrison fan. Graham Swift is another author that I have really enjoyed and I want to read more of his work. I picked up Wish You Were Here. This story takes place in 2006 and it's about Jack Luxton, who makes a journey to pick up his brother's ashes, his brother's remains, after he is killed in Iraq. And for Jack, this is a journey where he has to confront secrets and memories from his past. I loved Swift's writing in Here We Are, which I still think is an underrated little gem. So I'm hoping to get a similar kind of reading experience with this one. Next up is author Ann Patchett. I've only read one of her books so far, The Dutch House, which I absolutely loved. I want to read more of her work, so I actually picked up 5 of her novels. So I'm going to start with Commonwealth. Bert Cousins begins an affair with Beverly Keating, and it changes the lives of their 2 families forever. And then many years later, Beverly's daughter Franny begins an affair with a writer who ends up writing about Franny and her siblings' childhood. So that book becomes very successful, and it forces the siblings to really look at their lives. So we'll see how this one goes. Next is Bel Canto, which takes place at a birthday party of a very powerful businessman in South America. During that party, terrorists take the entire party hostage. And this is where I become intrigued. This is obviously a highly intense, live or die situation, but the terrorists and hostages begin to form bonds, and people begin to form intimate relationships. So this one, has me quite curious, and I know that it has been turned into a movie, obviously, with Julianne Moore, who I absolutely love. So maybe I will watch the movie after I've read this. The third book by Ann Patchett is The Patron Saint of Liars. I believe this is her debut novel, and I might actually start with this one. Maybe I will read them in publication order. I don't know. We'll see. This story takes place at a home for unwed mothers in Kentucky, and when Rose Clinton arrives at the home, she's not unwed, and she intends to give up her baby. But after her baby is born, she decides to keep her and stays at the home. But of course, her past won't stay away forever. So this sounds like it might be a good one. Next is The Magician's Assistant, and the main character in this story has been her husband's assistant for nearly 20 years when he dies. And after his death, she finds out that his biggest trick has been that he has left a whole entire family behind. And last in this huge pile is Taft. The main character is John Nickel, who is a black ex-jazz musician. He now manages a bar in Memphis, and after his girlfriend leaves with his son, John becomes obsessed with the father of a waitress that he's just hired, Faye Taft. And Faye and her brother have recently lost their own father, and John begins to kind of reconstruct the life of this man that he never even knew. So that sounds like it'll be an interesting one too. So these are, I think there's like 28 books here, which is crazy. These are the books that I hauled in May. Hopefully next year when I do the revisit, I will have read more than 2 or 3 of these, fingers crossed. I will also leave links below to the authors and publishers and booktubers and videos that I've mentioned. Please let me know in the comments below if you have read any of these or if you are interested in any of them. You know, do you have any authors that you want to read more of their works if you've read 1 or 2 of them? I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.